This conversation with Beth Green came at a really good time for me, as I have been playing around in my mind with this duality of wanting to be a deeply spiritual person and seeing the world as something more than just matter, but also wanting to be a politically responsible person, a socially responsible person who participates in the creation of justice, who participates in the creation of a world that reverses climate change, that participates in the creation of a world that doesn't condone violence and genocide and all the things that are happening right now. And I didn't know how to balance that. And it felt like I was swinging wildly back and forth between sort of trying to be blissed out about a harmonious universe versus feeling like I have to learn everything about every bad thing that anyone's ever done. And this conversation with Beth Green has really helped me to come to an equilibrium, to come to a balance, to a place where I don't have to choose, I don't have to split the difference, where the one feeds the other. So that's what I got out of it. In the middle, you're going to see me come back with this Band-Aid. I just cut myself shaving a little while ago, if you're watching this on YouTube, because we cut about an hour. And what happened was Beth is an intuitive counselor, and after talking about her and her life, I said, hey, do you want to do, show me what you've got? And she said, are you sure you want to do this? And I said, yes. And then she hit me with a question that led to some really deep, hard, painful private work. And so at the end of that, I decided that I was not going to share that. So we just bring it in. I'll reemerge. I'll pop up at that moment to just highlight the gap, because otherwise it could be confusing. And then we'll finish it out, and I'll come back and see you at the very end. So without further ado, Beth Green, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Well, thank you, Howie. I'm so delighted to be here.
Yeah, this is really good timing for me. And I'll explain why as we go along. But I just want to say, we've been trying to schedule this for a while, and it turns out that today is a perfect day for me. So I got sick. We messed up some times. This is perfect. And so I'd like to begin by just welcoming you again and inviting you to just tell us a little bit about yourself, because you're so many different things and you have worn so many different hats and you have such a long trajectory of being really interesting and impactful and inspiring. I would love for you just to lead us into your life.
Is this the 30-second version, the 3-minute version? I mean, like you said, there's so much to my life.
3 minutes,
I could go on for an
hour.
Good. 3 minutes, okay. Beth Green in 3 minutes. Well, I was born in New York City in 1945. It's an interesting time to be born, because it was just coming to the end of the war, the end of the Holocaust. That's World War II, for those of you who are younger. And I think that, I don't know why I'm starting there. It seems crazy to me. My parents were working class Jewish family, working hard, no money, caring a lot about their children's education, that kind of push from the parents to become somebody. And I think that I always felt like I did have to become somebody. And, but I felt a conflict between becoming somebody, whatever that meant, becoming a college professor, being able to afford nice things. And this part of me that was just outraged by the way things were in society. I saw it when my father would take me to work. He was a hardware salesman, and he went from store to store trying to sell these little, what we call tchotchkes, coffee mugs and stuff like that. And he was not treated well. And I saw that immediately. And so I became very aware at a very young age, maybe like 5 years old, that there was power in society and that it was used abusively. And I think that became the source of the rest of my life.
That's great.
And all the choices that I made, both, on the political, social activist side, where, as I mentioned to you, at 9 years old, they were trying to expel me from elementary school. and because I had become a socialist, and because I was against the McCarthy, and because they added under God to the Pledge of Allegiance, and it didn't matter whether you were religious or not. That was, bad news. That's church and state, right? And then I read about the Spanish Civil War and all of that, and I finally got into an Ivy League college after horrendous illnesses, and I could barely move or breathe. But my parents were so happy, right?
So you outgrew all the childish meshuggahs, and now you're going to become a real person. Is that what?
Yeah, I was going to go to school, and I was going to have a career and all of that. And I had been in bed for about a year and a half before that. So that was a very difficult transition for me. And I was still sick, and I really didn't know what that meant. But I wrote a letter to the New York Times about banning the bomb, and it was published all over the world. And I was scared because I was told not to walk, not to go to the bathroom except to pee. I couldn't take a shower for a year and a half. So I was really, really restricted, but I felt this urge to say something. And so I wrote this letter to New York Times and dared to walk to the corner and drop it in the mailbox, which I was told I could die if I did that, right? And then I went off to college where I had a scholarship.
Okay. Let's pause there. We'll do this in chunks.
Oh, I know I'm going on too much.
No, that was 3 minutes. That's what I asked for. But but I have questions. So
okay.
So I guess the first one, knowing sort of working class East Coast Jewish life, and of course there's a gamut. Socialism was not something unfamiliar to that generation. I'm curious. Do you think your dad took you around with him to kind of show you what it was like?
Oh my God, no, not my parents. Socialism was not alive or well in my family. My parents were trying just to survive. That was they were gutless. I shouldn't put it that way. It sounds so judgmental, but they weren't particularly courageous people. They were timid people. They were the children of immigrants. They came out of the Depression. And no, they didn't say a word. This all came from me. I don't know where it came from. I saw McCarthy on television. I said, whoever he's against, I am for. And then I read a book about the Spanish Civil War, and I was 9 years old, and I was very impressionable. And it was obvious, who were the good guys and who were the bad guys. And then seeing my father never said anything about it. I just saw it and felt it. And I'm an empath because, as you know, I became a counselor many years later. I'm an intuitively guided counselor, and I'm an empath, and I feel people's pain. And I saw the way the immigrants were being treated even back then. Jewish immigrants coming over from displaced persons camp being made fun of by Jewish people living in our community. I was 5 years old, and I was furious with my parents and their friends. And I said, you can't tell a book by its cover. And my mother never forgot that. That didn't come from them. So they were very conventional and were scared. The favorite phrase in our house was, what will the neighbors think?
Ooh,
That's how I was raised.
Wow, so you must have been a handful.
But only mentally, because I was always weak and always sick. So what could I do? So,
can I ask about that? What was the illness that you?
Okay. Well, when I was a child, I was born with something called EDS, which is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a weakness in the connective tissue. And I had a lot of problems. It was hard for me to walk, and my nose bled, and I bled easily and all of that. But then when I was 15, I got rheumatic fever, and I had many illnesses along the line. And then when I had rheumatic fever, that was like a death sentence at the time. And so they put me on phenobarbital and 21 aspirin a day and prophylactic penicillin. And I was told not to move and just to stay still. That's what they felt would save my life. So I never recovered, because when I came out of that, my health was ruined, and I never got it back, and it became worse and worse over time.
And yet you're how old now?
80 years old. Can you believe I've made it this long? It's just because I'm ornery.
Yeah.
I know I'm very lucky. I have a husband who does all the physical things in the house, the shopping, the cooking. If you have to plug something into the wall, or open a box, that's him. I can't do anything, but my mind is still with me.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
I learned to live in my mind because there wasn't much body to go around. So
Gotcha. Gotcha. I guess I'm pushing ahead a little bit. Like when I think of an empath, I think of someone
yeah,
who has a sensitive sort of body awareness, right? And so
mm,
I'm hearing you say like you live in your mind and not so much in the body, and yet you're empathic and you can kind of sense other people and what they need and what's going on with them. How does that work?
well, I don't know. I've never thought about that question. Um, I feel in my body. I have pain. I have fatigue. I have a lot of, I have a lot of bodily sensations. So I don't live in my mind from that perspective. It's just that I can't do much with my body, and that was true even as a child when I went to elementary school. When I went to gym, I couldn't do one thing, not one thing that the other children did. So there was obviously something going on with this body of mine.
Mm.
But I think it's part of my sensitivity. I'm just very sensitive. I'm sensitive to chemicals. But I do feel, I feel people's pain. And I don't only feel it in my body, I just feel it in my whole being.
Mm.
And it's a very difficult place to be. And it's especially difficult now when so many people are suffering. It's not just me. The whole world is suffering, and people are scared, and people are oppressed, and people are hysterical. And, it's a very, very hard time to be sensitive.
Mhm.
And it's a hard time to be alive, to watch what's going on in our nation.
Yeah. So, continuing your story, you became I would say sort of, progressive activist.
Yes. So I do want to finish that because there was this piece about being at Smith College, which was a fancy girls' school. And I had no friends. I was talking about socialism to these girls who came from the upper class and were having coming out parties,
Mm.
and didn't know anything about the life of other people. And it was a very weird thing. There was a Jewish quota, by the way. Somehow I got into the Jewish quota. Um,
And
but
that's a maximum, not a minimum.
a maximum, yes, right, exactly. There's a maximum. How many Jews you could count on the head of a pin. So, but what happened in that first year when I wrote this letter to the New York Times, it spread around the world. It was put on a Pete Seeger album and all of that. And I didn't even know it was published. I just walked to the mailbox, dropped this letter, and suddenly I get a call from my parents. Is this you? This letter was published in the New York Times. And I started getting letters from all over the world. And it resonated, Howard. It was like the first time in my life I didn't feel alone. There were people all over the world. It was read on, public radio in New York City. And so I've never been this famous. And then I was 16 years old, right? That was my moment of fame. But anyway, I knew finally that there were others out there that really cared and that were concerned about the same kind of things that I was. And because I was a very lonely, isolated child, as you can imagine.
Mm.
And the college got wind of it because somebody from some rabbi there, he wasn't a rabbi, of course, but some social worker there had seen my letter. It was published in books and so on. And they told the administration, and the administration came down on me and tried to get me out of that school as quickly as possible.
And it was against nuclear proliferation or the.
That's all it was. I wrote a personal letter as a 16-year-old. It's like very personal. It's like I'm a 16-year-old and I'm watching my world go, towards oblivion, and the things that I was afraid of, radiation and so on. And some students contacted me from some of the Ivy League schools and asked me if I wanted to go march around the White House. Now, I'm telling you this story because it's like the pivotal moment of life, that you don't even know that it's going to be so important that the students asked me if I wanted to go on this hunger march in Washington to march around the White House. And I said, of course, yes, right?
Uh-huh. So now,
So
if my math is correct, Kennedy had just been elected.
that's right. Kennedy was in office. It was, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 1961 by that time, I guess. Oh, please don't even try to follow my math or my memory.
Okay.
I have never, since childhood, I have no memory. And so so I assumed there was going to be thousands of us, right? There's 14 students marching around the White House. 14. And my picture ends up on the front page of the New York Times. And my parents don't know I'm there. And then I get another call. Was that you walking around? My poor parents are having a heart attack. They spent their whole lives trying to get their daughter into college, into a better life than they had, all the opportunities that they didn't have. And now there I am on the front page of the New York Times. And in order to go to that demonstration, I had to cut any class. And I was very honorable. And I told the administration, I have to cut this class. It was on a day you weren't supposed to cut classes in the day. And they said they were going to teach me a lesson I'd never forget. They would punish me if I went. And when these students came, and I'm telling you the story, I think, because it's really important now. You know, I have a million stories about my life that I could tell you could go on for years about all the things that I have faced because of politics or spirituality. But I knew I was going to be punished. And when those kids came and picked me up, these perfect strangers, right? I sat in that car and I was terrified. I was terrified. Everything that my parents had hoped for was about to go down the drain because I knew they would be ruthless. And I didn't jump out of the car. I went. And why I'm telling you this makes, you know, I feel like crying about this. It's really odd. I had made a choice. And it's the same choice that we have to make today, that every one of us has to make today. Are we going to go along with this police state? Are we going to go along with a ruthless income inequality, capitalist system that really doesn't care what it does to people? Are we going to go along with this treatment of immigrants? Are we going to go along with the dismantling of our democracy and our world? Are we going to take the risk of everything that we love being taken away from us? And that's why I'm telling you this story, Howie, because I think that today we're all facing that, at least those of us who are here in the U.S. And some people are standing up and some people aren't.
Yeah. Well, you know, I always wondered, like, what went on in Nazi Germany among good people.
How could it have happened?
Right? What, like, now I totally get it. Like, now I'm weighing, like, well, what do I do? I mean, first of all, it's, you know, I'm not in the U.S. at the moment, but that's not an excuse to do nothing. But there's a calculus that comes in. Like, I have a much greater empathy for ordinary Germans who went along. It's like, you know, do I want to lose my job and my house and not have any, you know, business prospects and be ostracized?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's, you know, and I think, you know, one of the things that I'm discovering is how contagious cowardice and courage are.
Yes.
You know, so that
this might interest you. The when they finally got to expel me, they put me on a probation where I couldn't cut any classes, which was impossible because I was barely out of bed and very, very weak, and they knew it. I mean, they knew it, so they had an excuse and they expelled me without a hearing. By the way, you know, I was sent to a gulag without due process. I got no due process, and even the ACLU wouldn't take on my case. They weren't going to stand up to Smith College. I was alone after that, alone and crushed. And I understand that feeling of being gone, like everything just gone.
So
And the
did you go back
ruthlessness.
home?
I had to, I had no place else to go. But they said, and this was the cute thing, they said, they told me that had to leave the school that day. My parents are working in New York City and they're going to be in Massachusetts and pick me up that day. It was impossible. I couldn't even reach my parents. And so I begged them to give me another day so my parents could come and pick me up. I couldn't drive. I was a 16-year-old sick girl with no car. Been spend most of my life, sick. And but they said this, and this is in alignment with what you just said. They said you have to leave immediately because you are infecting the other girls. That was the happiest moment I could have done. I thought, I am not infecting these girls. I don't see it. I don't see anybody being infected.
Right.
But they said I was infecting the other girls. So you're right. Courage. And the other girls who had not spoken to me all year came to my room that night and helped me pack. Something in them was touched by what was happening to me. I think they realized that if it could happen to me, it could happen to them. No one was ever expelled. If you were caught having sex on the front lawn, they might ask you to leave. This was really draconian. Even my teachers begged them to let me finish the school year. They put it in my record that I was expelled for infringement of academic regulations or something, which meant that I was cheating, which of course wasn't true. They said they'll make sure I'd never get into another college. And something was stirred in these girls that at least in that moment, they felt the need to support me.
Yeah. Well, you're only like 6 years ahead of your time, right? Like by 67, like 6 years later, that was the norm.
Exactly. I'm always ahead of my time, even with my spirituality. So that doesn't make for a very successful life. But
yeah, well, it depends how you measure it.
Right.
So I just got to. Does Smith College send you fundraising email letters?
No,
they don't.
They expunged me from the record, probably.
Okay, because I know expensive universities. I know. My university found me in Spain. I have no idea how, but I get the Alumni Weekly.
Well, I get from UCLA and Brooklyn and all that.
Right. The U.S. government can't find me. They can't send me my tax returns. But Princeton University, they must have a drone. They know exactly where I am.
So why are you in Spain? If it's okay for me to ask a question.
Yeah, sure. Partly the immediate reason is we have two kids, adults, who can't see themselves succeeding in a brutally capitalist society.
Oh, really?
They're artists, they're musicians, they're writers, and every time they would, express a desire to do that, something in those fields, the whole society came together and said, okay, yes. Music, you could be a music teacher. You could do music therapy. Oh, art, you could do art therapy. Oh, writing, yes. You could, art, you could do commercial art. And yes. Everything was, how do you monetize this?
Oh, God, yes.
And there's got to be a world in which human creativity is valued as a social good. So we look at capitalism, some things are valued, making people sick so they have to take drugs is highly valued. It's a part of GDP, but taking care of children or aging parents is not valued. It's not considered part of GDP unless you go to work and you pay somebody else to do it.
Yes.
And they saw that there was nothing, there are famous artists and musicians who are very successful, but that's a shell game, right? Yeah. It's like saying, oh, I'm good at basketball, I'm going to make the NBA. Well, almost nobody does, right? And the few that do, right. So they moved to Spain, to Barcelona, and after a few months, my wife and I were like, "What are we doing here?" Like first of all, I'd been in deep depression since 2016 when Trump won.
Oh,
Um,
oh,
right. And I want to say that having sort of like my mother was a Holocaust survivor, and
oh,
I think I know just from what I understand about epigenetics that I inherited um, neurologically active threat receptors, like
yeah.
just seeing things well before they happen, and
Wow.
being ready to bolt. And a friend of mine and I, we came up with sort of a spreadsheet. We called it the boiled frog fascism spreadsheet, because most of the Jews never got out of Germany,
Yes.
or like when they could have. My
Yes.
my mother's family did. First of all, they were in Vienna, so a lot of Viennese Jews managed to survive.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I feel like I sense danger even when there is none. Right?
Yes.
It's a tremendous cost. There's a lot, there's a lot of health issues, and just
Yeah.
it's not a great way to live. But the advantage is when there is something now that resembles danger, I'm very quick to notice it. And for some reason, it didn't occur to me like, oh, let's stay and fight. It's like let's follow the kids. Let's see you know what something else could look like. And I don't know more than that. My wife is also not American. She was born in Namibia in Southern Africa, and so she didn't really have an allegiance.
Hmm.
So we went on an adventure, and we're still here 2 years later.
I love it. Hey, if it weren't for the drought, I would consider moving to Spain or Portugal.
Yeah.
But I'm so freaked out about the drought and the death of trees. That is, and by the way, I'm a musician. I don't know if you know that. I
Uh,
totally understand what you're talking about. Totally. And talking about that, if I can sort of twist that into a political conversation.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. It's about housework. See, I was the West Coast coordinator of the Wages for Housework campaign from 1974 to 78. That's when it was really getting going. And the whole concept was that, Marx was talking. I actually was a Marxist. I don't mean that I was like a Soviet communist or a
Uh-huh.
Maoist or anything, but I read Marx and I thought, this guy makes sense.
Uh-huh.
Somehow he knew all those years ago what was going to happen. And, but one of the things that he talked about is the value of labor, is what it costs to reproduce labor power. So what women do and have done forever, traditionally in most societies, is raise the next generation and take care of the workers, and sometimes be the workers too, the second job. And so the whole role of women in society is to reproduce the working class, or to reproduce the CEOs, and to take care of them when they come home, assuage their bruised egos and feed them and do all of those kinds of things. So it's all about nurturance. And you see, what you are talking about, I associate with being an artist is about feeding the soul.
Hmm.
And it's not a commodity. So women's work of housework has no value, and taking care of the earth has no value. And nothing that has to do with nurturance and caring has value. What the idea was, give the man a wage that somehow is going to keep everybody alive, but the women weren't going to be paid for the work, and that's why women had no power. And that came from Selma James, that women had no power because we didn't get paid for the primary work that we do. And I'm taking that and extrapolating that to our whole society does not care for people or the earth, because that is not what capitalism values. It's exactly what you're talking about. And And it totally fits into the treatment of artists, spiritual people, even counselors, people who are taking care of the human soul.
Yeah.
It has no value because it can't be sold. And the capitalists, they take they sell your product and give you what you need to survive, and they keep the rest. And that's the beginning and end of it. I mean, it's really that simple if you really look at it. It's really that simple. They keep the rest. That's how they accumulate wealth, by not paying you the value of your work. And so, you keep doing that. And then, of course, money breeds money and all of that. And it will inevitably lead to what we see today, which is this obscene difference between what the people on top and what the people on the bottom are receiving. But it really comes down to see what we believe, my organization, The Stream, is that the purpose of society is to take care of the needs of people and the earth. And that is the only purpose to have a society. And that's the only purpose of an economy. Why do you have an economy? You think about the old days. I mean, you bartered chickens and pigs. You needed a chicken, I needed a pig. And so we were taking care of our needs, our collective needs. And that's the purpose of an economy. But no, under capitalism, the purpose of economy is to make profit. And in order to make profit, you have to not pay people what the value of what they're creating. And what they do instead is, what do you have to give people in order to survive so that they can come back and work the next day?
Right. And not revolt.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Bread and roses.
That's right.
Or bread and circuses, more like.
Bread and circuses. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And in fact, Marx even talked about back in the middle of the 19th century, and it's been like a lot of years since I read these books. I'm 80 now. Maybe I read them when I was 19, but I still remember certain things really clearly. And because it made sense, it's like, oh yeah, of course. And he talked about how there was going to come a time because of technology that it was going to take less and less and less and less and less time to produce the goods. And what are you going to do with all these people? Because then they might have time. Mm. You have people working 2 hours a day. They might have time to start demanding that their needs be met or think about it. And so you have to find other ways of social control and keep people busy and all this nonsense, which we see today.
Yeah. And I work as a consultant and coach and trainer in organizations, and I'm on the soft side, right? I'm on the side, like, let's teach people how to work together as teams, how to support each other, and one of the saddest things about that work is that in order to get it, we have to justify it in terms of, right? So we write books about, look, these are these companies that have instituted and implemented these humane policies are making more money. Look at this company. Look at, it's conscious capitalism. This is the way. And of course, the unspoken corollary is, well, but if it doesn't make more money, then it's not worth doing. As opposed to, what if we implemented all this and we all made less money, but we're happier and human and we don't come home and kick our dogs and vote for fascists.
Drink and take drugs and vote for fascists. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's good. And so, how is your business doing in this environment?
Well, I mean, that's when I started, I said, this is a really good time to talk to you, because I've actually been spending this week doing very sort of deep strategic thinking about who I am and what do I want to do. And how do I want to support, I love that, needs of people and the earth, to bring about, to help people in relationship, to help people interbe with the whole world, with the living earth, to create regeneration as opposed to further destruction. And so the first thing I'll say about that is I have been whiplashing between two different types of influencers and content. And the reason when I got the pitch from whoever sent me the pitch for you to be on this podcast is that you do both spiritual and political. So
Yes.
the political people I read and listen to are brilliant, and they're really angry, and they're
I know, and I
outraged,
can't.
and they're
Oh God.
pissed off. And
Yeah.
so people, and I adore these people. They're sort of like Chris Hedges and
Yeah.
Yanis Varoufakis, the former Minister of Finance of Greece, who's head of started an organization called Democracy 25 for Europe. Jason Hickel, who wrote a book called Less is More about how, the intersection of capitalism and the climate crisis.
Mm.
And Peter Beinart, who wrote a book called Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza. And
Mm.
and of course, all of these people are saying, they're reading Marx, they're applying it, they're saying like
Right.
this is how shitty things are. And I
Yes.
feel like, I need to know this in order to
Yes.
really understand the world. Because there was a time, my dad was a Trotskyite labor leader, ILGWU. He was, when
Wow.
I was a kid, he was the director of education for the uh, Local 9 of the United Auto Workers. He was a Teamsters trustee, like labor was his whole life. And as I went out into the world, I kind of got seduced by capitalism a little bit. Because when
Mm.
you don't look at the externalities, when you don't look at the whole system, it seems like, oh, look, this new system has brought so much prosperity and
Yes.
excitement and new
Yes.
stuff. So it was really important for me to get back to these very, very, socialist, angry systems thinker roots. And all I could feel was that I was just overwhelmed and I was judgmental and angry, and there was no work that I
Yeah.
wanted to do. And then I would read these spiritual teachers. So some of
Right.
my favorites were Rupert Spira and Adyashanti, teachers of non-dualism. Michael
Mhm.
Singer, who did the surrender experiment and the untethered soul. Ram Dass, a perennial favorite that I would listen to. And these people are talking about like the real purpose of life on this planet is for us to get to know ourselves and develop our spirit and to be present and to not
Yeah.
take things personally. And then I would, get caught up in the spiritual world.
Right.
And
Your feet were no longer on the ground.
yeah, I was no longer like, oh, okay, so this is, this is the Maya, this is the illusion, the 10,000
Mhm.
things. So
Oh yeah. Right.
don't
Right.
need to
This is
do
some
any,
illusion, right?
right? I don't need to do anything about it, you know.
Right. Right. Tell that to people who've been sent to the El Salvador prison.
So,
Life is an illusion. Right.
so both of those, one of them makes me feel better and allows me, like the spiritual stuff allows me to
Yeah.
be powerful in my feet, right? I'm not on the ground right now,
Yeah.
to walk out into the world and see people as beautiful souls, to console people,
Yeah.
to be wise.
Yes.
And I could do that and make a lot of money and not worry about the rest. And there's this, so that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about.
Oh
Is
my God. Oh my God, Howard.
how do we live in both of these? And
Okay.
right.
I love it. I love it. I totally understand. Well, let me tell you, I was a leftist until 1978. I became a socialist in 1954. And then in 1978, I went to an Al-Anon meeting, which was for the families of alcoholics. And I looked at those people and I was burnt out with politics. The infighting, the anger, the hatred, the polarization of the left was disgusting.
Mhm.
And I couldn't stand it. And I was badly treated by the leader of our movement. And it wasn't just me. She went and she picked off all the leaders in North America, Canada, New York, LA. That was the three of us. She picked us all off and got rid of us. And I mean, it was politics, it's just awful. And so I was in shock and didn't know what to do next. First my life was destroyed by illness. Then my life was destroyed by being expelled from college. And then more, but then my life was destroyed by just facing up to how bad the left was. And because it was still there, because there was no self-awareness. There was no self-awareness. It was all blame and anger and all of that stuff. That was my experience. Other people might have a different experience. Okay. It sounds utopian, but it wasn't. And then came the spiritual awakening. And I looked at these women and I said, they know something I don't. They're a lot more serene than I am. And then suddenly I started hearing God. Now, remember, I'm a Marxist, right? And, I was on the outs with the whole left because I was a Marxist and I believed in making revolution, class revolution. I wasn't interested in taking drugs, tuning in, dropping out, doing any of those things. I never came to me. I didn't use drugs. I didn't want to be arrested for nothing, and I was in underground movements. I did a lot of stuff. I was working with the Black Panther Party. Let me tell you, I was all over the place. And then, I just what am I supposed to do? And I started hearing this inner voice and it's telling me what to do. And it said, don't read anything. Don't study with anything. Don't do any of those things. I didn't read anybody, and just be a blank slate that I can write on. So I started listening to this inner voice that I had spirit guides. I listened to God and all of that. I started writing books that I didn't know anything about, doing tapes about topics that I didn't know what I was going to talk about until the tape recorder was on. That was in the day when we used tapes. And I was just a channel. And then in 1984, my friends on the other side, they said, it's time for you to own what you know. And so we're leaving. So all these guides disappeared on me. And I will tell you that it was such an education, because I'm going to give you an example. I sometimes I use past lives as a therapeutic modality in those days. And I very rarely do that now. And I said, are there really past lives? And the inner voice said, what do you care? If it's useful, use it.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, do you exist? I mean, it was Lord Maitreya and it was KH. And I had names for these guys and they were in books. I was guided to go to a library and go to a shelf in that library, never been in there before, put my hand on this book, take it down, open the book, and it said The Brotherhood of the Light. And I had just been told to call my guides brother. And they said, okay, close the book now and put it away. So, this was wild. I had a wild life. I'd be told, you're going to buy this house. And I did, all kinds of stuff. I was really, really guided. But then I said, do you exist? And they said, what do you care? And in later years, and I wrote a book called Sacred Union, The Healing of God, they told me to say that God is not perfect and that there is no perfect God and that God is evolving and that we are aspects of God in the process of evolution and that we are aspects of God, that we are healing God, that God is not healing us because God is the totality of all being. God is the rapist and the saint. Well, I just want to tell you that went over like a lead balloon. Just like my Marxism went over badly with the movement, my spirituality went over really badly with people who wanted an easy way into nirvana. And I didn't give it to them. It was all about self-awareness. And I did. When I published the book, Sacred Union, The Healing of God, I lost half of my clients. One more time, I had to take a chance on saying what I believed and being very unpopular. It's the whole mark of my life. And then I kept evolving. And then one day God said, there is no God. And so you need to tell people there is no God. I am a spiritual teacher. I am the leader of a spiritual organization. That's how I made my living, is people came to me. I was a counselor. I'm a really good counselor. I have the capacity to see into people and to see what's going on with them that they don't want anybody to see. And that sometimes is good, and sometimes people hate it because people don't want the truth, really, generally speaking. And so whatever it was that I felt guided, I needed to do. And I wrote a book called Living with Reality. And it was very down to earth. And I have a book called The Handbook for the Inner Revolution. And I saw that there was never going to be a revolution if there wasn't an inner revolution, because the ego is behind it all. And there's the answer, is until we overcome the toxic domination of ego, we will always be an ego. There is ego in spirituality. The ego hijacks spirituality. We have all these gurus, and then there's manifestation consciousness. Oh, I'm visualizing, such and such, and there is no objective reality. That's not what I was taught. You walk into a wall, it's going to hurt because there is a wall there, and we have to deal with reality. We have to live with reality. We have to find a way to be congruent with it. And the ego is born when we are born. The ego is self-preservation. To put it in very simple terms, is what do I do? And you're describing that you were born with a highly sensitized ego of looking for danger, and you became conditioned to do that. And so my goal is to help people to overcome the conditioning that makes us defensive, fear-based, and also makes us try to rise above it. Because we are really one, and I talk about it in very concrete terms, how we are one. I couldn't live a day without all the other people in this world who have raised my food and paved the road and, who made the cloth. This is nonsense that I'm an individual. There is no individual. We're all raised in a culture, and that culture indoctrinates us from the beginning. We don't even have an individual thought, but we're all part of the whole. And the more we become aware of how conditioned we are, and the more we are willing to stand up to the traditional thinking, whether it's spiritual thinking or political thinking, that's the beginning of actually looking at things as they really are, staying in a calm place, because I believe that we need that calm that spirituality can bring us. That calm place to look at things objectively so we can think, and so that we can learn to respond. And my book, Living with Reality, is 688 pages. And it is full of tools. And it's a program. It's like it's a self-study, and it's free on the internet. I put all my stuff on the internet free because I want to help. And it goes back to, how do we deal with the domination of ego when we live in a world where everybody else's ego is fighting with us? Mm. And it starts in the family, where you have to get the attention of mommy. And who are you competing with in order to get mommy's attention? And do you even care if mommy is falling on her face and dead tired? How we need to reprogram ourselves to start thinking of the whole. Mm. So that's how I combine them. It's not putting this together with that. It's that this is that. That it's all about overcoming the domination of ego, finding that objectivity, the willingness to see the truth, and to recognize that we are not individuals. I once asked God, who am I? Who am I? I'm a Marxist, and suddenly I'm channeling these, and I'm getting all this good stuff, from somewhere. Who am I? And God said, look in the stream. And he said, look in the stream. He said, you are the drop of water that's different from all the rest. I'm looking at the stream, and I said,
oh, God's a Zen monk, huh?
Oh, absolutely. I said, which drop is that? And he said, that's my point. Uh-huh. There is no drop of water different from all the rest. And we're all part of that. And I even know that anything I'm thinking, somebody else is thinking. Mm. So because I'm part of the collective.
Yeah. Can I ask a distinction that I would want to make? I'd like to hear your take on it. So you talk about ego as sort of the self-preservation instinct. Most of the work that I do, I would say, is very much aligned in terms, I love when you talk about looking objectively at reality, and the self-preservation instinct that helps me jump out of the road when a car's coming is not ego. However,
that is the proper use of the ego. The ego is supposed to tell you when you need to put on a sweater. The ego is supposed to tell you that there's a train coming down the tracks. But it's not supposed to take you over. It's not supposed to dominate you. You need self-preservation because you're an individual. See, the way I put it is it's becoming oneness is the first step of my program. The second one is becoming differentiated, is you are an individuated aspect of the whole. And you've got to be able to take care of yourself or you won't exist to even do anything beyond that. But that is not being dominated. You're not being dominated. You're using it properly.
Yeah. So the work that I do, it's largely based in sort of neurology and brain science. So neuroscience around, and the discovery that around that I've fallen into a good crowd. I've fallen in with a good crowd around this idea of memory reconsolidation, which is this idea that the reason I'm scared of a confrontation, that my body gets tense, I get angry, is because somehow I have learned to that is a lethal threat. It's the same as the car or the saber-toothed tiger. And we now know, for people who are certainly willing, how to create experiences that create a disconfirmation of that. And I'm wondering, as you hear that, does that feel like it's...
Oh, absolutely. I totally believe in that. I've always believed in that. It's just using different words. It's like we get programmed to a certain reaction. But what I have discovered is that it's not so damn easy to reprogram. I do not find that easy. And I call it, I do a lot of redos, like go back and redo this experience, or feel that you had a loving parent at that moment. And try to get back into that energy. So I do all kinds of work just like that, and always have, really. But it's amazing how many people, no matter how much they try and we try, it's so deep. And because it is associated with survival, I mean, it's the first minute we're born. We're in the oneness, right? We're in the womb. And then suddenly we're out there. And we've got to start crying. And if we don't cry, nobody's going to take care of us. See, and then we learn various techniques, tools, patterns that work with our families. Like, if my mother is going to be the kind of person who is influenced by guilt, I learn how to guilt trip. Or if she's fear-based, I can create fear in her, or whatever it is. I pick out who in the family looks like they're really going to take care of me. And then I pander to them. And I've got these programs that go back to birth, Howie. And it's not just traumatic experiences that happen to us when we're 12. I mean, it's just part of, I think it's a stupid design. I have told God, I'm going to put my phone on Do Not Disturb. I have told God that the whole human race is a stupid design. And I think that the whole universe is a stupid design. And I'll tell you why. Because this bullshit about you're in school, right? The spiritual teachers, they tell you you're in school. Oh, really? Would you send your child to a school where they put cigarettes into their arms to teach them? Would you call that a school that you would put your children into? No. So it's all screwed up. And I blame God. But, God is not perfect. God is evolving. God was doing the best she could. And, I'm wondering if we just aren't an experiment gone awry.
Yeah. Yeah. Also needs, where I think.
Oh, yeah. But this is all based on needs.
No, I said knees.
We have needs. What's that, disease?
Knees, like
knees?
Like the knee joints. I think that was also a mistake. I think.
Oh, well, of course, there's so much evolution that,
if we're putting chits into the suggestion box, I just want to get that in there.
Yeah, could you get rid of the knees? And could you get rid of menstruation while you're at it? And, could we have a more enlightened approach? And what is this nonsense about women have to have pain in childbirth?
Question for you. So I can sort of imagine how easy it is to stay clear on belief and message when you have voices talking to you all the time. I don't know, once the voices stopped and they said you're on your own, how do you keep, like, what do you do to not like, all right, we're in this world,
Yes.
like one of my challenges is I keep forgetting what I believe, or I keep getting, seduced by another, like this person or this idea. And I feel like I have,
No rudder.
well,
You have
I have
rudder,
like values and
but
priorities and an
you
understanding,
have
but it's still,
you have no rudder.
yeah.
I'm telling you, Howie. I mean, I'm not using my empathetic,
I actually
counseling
wish you
skills
would. When
on
you
you.
said you like counselor, like I would love to hear what comes through, and I'm fine sharing it. Like,
Really, I'm not sure you really know what you're asking for. I mean, you really want, I can do a session for you anytime, right now, if you want.
let's
Is
do it.
that what you're asking? Okay. Okay. But first of all, let me tell you that I didn't lose the inner voice. It just didn't come in the form of Nasser, Moria, and all of that stuff. And it's different. It comes in more of like inner knowing, but I do not have the same. I was trained, go left, go right, do this, do that, don't do anything. I was told, don't drink any water until I tell you to. I mean, I was really trained to listen. So I live at the intersection of the human and divine. I'm always listening. I'm always being guided. And that is the way that I work. So I just wanted to clarify that. So I still have guidance, but boy, it's not easy the way it used to be. But I'm also not as stupid as I used to be, because God told me, here's another one of those God things. I wrote a book called Gospel Aphorism. God said that decisions should be made at the intersection of intuition, observation, experience, and common sense. And you need to be able to bring all of those things together. It's like the integration of consciousness. It is integration. We have to become integrated. So long story. You should look at my book, Living with Reality. It's really full of this, like, that's so obvious.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I will say
mean,
I didn't prepare for this interview by doing much beyond looking at your website and watching a couple of videos. So, there's interviews where I've read the book and redlined everything, and this is not one of those. So I'm looking forward to the follow-up. But I hope it's still helping people, get to know
Oh
you.
yeah, I'm sure it is. And remember, it's at I call it healingartnetwork.org. And it's got all my books. It's got music. It's got videos. It's got blogs from the old days. I mean, it's just full of stuff. And it's all free, healingartnetwork.org. My current website is thestream.info, where you can get the new Declaration of Independence. See, that was one of the things God said to me like a couple months ago. You need to write the new Declaration of Independence. And I sat down and wrote it. And it's about not only what we're against, but what we're for, and validating that we have a right to stop this government because we've done it before. But yeah, it's a revolution. So if you really want me to work with you, I would be delighted, and you can always cut it out if it's too revealing, because you have to be very honest with me.
Yeah.
And with yourself. Okay. 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 So I may ask you questions that go against what you already think and believe. And by the way, I just want to say something about beliefs. In my book, I wrote something down once. I just channeled it, called The Path of Not Knowing, and that we need to be not knowing. And beliefs are just beliefs. They have nothing to do with reality. And so don't get attached to any belief system. Just whatever, if it's working and it helps, use it. If it doesn't help, dump it. That's what I was taught about beliefs.
Perfect.
Like it's a helpful belief to think that there is going to be a street when you walk out the door, because then to put your shoes on, you can walk out. But then if you get there and there's been an earthquake, there is no street.
Yeah.
So And so when our beliefs are being confronted by reality, most people will choose their beliefs over reality.
Yeah.
That's part of their survival. And so saying that we have a lot of beliefs about ourselves, especially if we've done a lot of therapy or introspection, and I'm asking you to throw out everything you think you know about you.
Okay.
So the first question that popped into my mind in 1 second was, why do you hate your mother?
Ooh.
You sure you want to go on?
So I did say yes. And that first question, as you could see, was pretty dark and deep. And we ended up having almost an hour session on it. And at the end, it was clear that this was not for public consumption. There were too many privacy issues with people in my life. And you'll just have to take my word for it that it was remarkable and amazing and eye-opening and liberating in a lot of really positive ways. So I'm going to bring us back in at the very, very tail end when I'm getting some feedback and a little bit of debriefing from Beth, and then we go into our close.
You're going to be all right, no matter what it looks like, no matter how bad it gets. Something on the inside survives and can grow. And I love that you're committed to that and that you want that for everyone. By the way, something you don't know about me is that I have been a consultant to some people in business too.
Uh-huh.
Because what I found out is that people are people wherever they are.
Yeah.
And if you have a business problem, it's usually you have a people problem.
Uh-huh. Right.
So I understand that. And they don't want to hear it either.
Yeah.
Because there's so many things that feel threatened when we break out of the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know.
Well, I really appreciate the work you just did with me.
Oh, good. So you don't feel the same way, like this isn't fitting.
Oh, it hasn't hit me like, you know, so I'm not going to appease you by saying,
Don't.
so it
Don't
doesn't feel 100%, but there's certainly enough. And the exercise that you invited me to do is, I can see its value, and I think there's more to come. I think I'll be in touch to kind of continue. Right. And I'll also, I want to share this with my family and get their opinion on like because I think this is very valuable, and I would love to share as much as would be respectful to share on the podcast. And that just might mean some light editing.
Whatever you do, I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, it's really totally up to you. I know you would disclose a lot of personal things, and that's up to you. And yes, of course, it's not complete. It's like, this is the first volley. And, you know, if you see me again, you'll see that I'm going to come in from a completely different angle the next time, because I just follow guidance. Mm-hmm. The guidance might be next time, why did you hate your sister? Or why do you love your mother? Or who knows what it is. Uh-huh. So I just follow my guidance, and we take each piece as it comes up, because that's it. I feel from my experience that every behavior has roots, and a lot of them. And until you pull out every root, you're still stuck. Yeah. But less and less stuck. And so we have to go into deep places to get to those roots. So I absolutely respect that and understand that. I wouldn't expect it to be any different. But it's like, okay, here's the first shaking up of the story. Some insights you didn't have before, and some understanding, and you will start filling in some of the blanks yourself, because you'll suddenly say, you know, I just like you did with that story about the sister.
Yeah.
Was it the sister? Yeah. That you said, oh, all of a sudden you saw it, and you will see a lot. So I hope you do come back. And but in any case, it's been just great talking to you.
Well, likewise, I really appreciate your perspective, which is so grounded in common sense, and I haven't heard most of it before. So it's the sort of thing like you hear something, and then I feel like I always knew it. So that
Yes. Didn't I tell you about my book? You read Living with Reality. Everything you read says, well, I knew that.
Yeah.
But that's the great thing, because we do know it, but we don't know it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So
that's really
So as we close, let people know how they can follow you. What are the main websites and ways that people can get in touch, and what can you do for them?
Okay. Well, I'm a counselor, so I can, if you're interested in learning more about my counseling, and I've been doing it since 1980, so I'm old in the tooth, but I'm experienced, and and you can find out more about my counseling and me at bethgreen.org.
All right.
And that's BETHGREEN.org. If you're interested in my free books and music, which can be very helpful, they're at healingartsnetwork.org. And my nonprofit is called thestream.info. 1983, God told me to call my work The Stream. And I said, what is the stream? And God said, it's the process of becoming who you already are. And I was like that. I love these aphorisms. I could never be that smart. I love that stuff. You know what I mean? It makes me look so enlightened, but I'm not. It's just like, oh, that's a great one. And but the stream.info, you can see more about our organization and how we've been mobilizing to create a positive vision for change, not just to be opposed to what's happening, but to also to look at the things that underlie it, why it came to be, and what we can do about it. You can sign the new Declaration of Independence that you can find there. And there is something called Next Steps, which is the stream.info/next steps. And that's a really cool, easy to access page that has a bunch of stuff on it. You'll see lots of links to my work, but not necessarily my healing work, my, counseling, which is what I do for a living. I have to say, I have to make a living somehow.
Sure.
And I love to hear, and people can write to me at beth@thestream.info. I love to hear from people, and I want to hear what people are feeling about what we can do in order to fight for a positive vision. And that answers your question. How do I get away from that negativity of the left? And how do I get away from that airy-fairy stuff that says reality doesn't exist? Well, you have a positive vision of what you're fighting for, and you fight for it. And, and you know that in order to fight for it, you have to touch people's hearts. I don't believe that we should divide people between Republicans and Democrats and independents and progressives. I think that people are all suffering, and I want to speak to that. And so that's my approach, is speak to our common pain, recognize that some people have become so twisted by their negative experiences, because each person has a story of their own of abuse. It's not just political. Everybody has suffered. Everybody does suffer. I believe that. I believe every CEO suffers, because we live in a dehumanizing society. So there it is. And if you ever want to talk to me again, I'm available.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Beth Green, this has been such a beautiful conversation from my perspective. You've really given me steps towards healing. Like I said, I came to you in this particular moment with these things coming to a head, and you not only helped me philosophically and strategically, but really helped me dig down to my own root of why this dichotomy exists and the energy that's been sustaining it. And so I'm so grateful.
I'm so glad, Howie. I'm very, very appreciative of this opportunity. And I want to get out there and I want to speak as much as possible. I don't care if it's big or small, if I'm on the front page of the New York Times or the last page of the Podunk News. You just never know when you're going to reach a kindred spirit and touch somebody's heart and make a difference for them. And that's the best we can do now, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all you do, for your 80 years of light. May you live to 120. And thank you for taking this time with me today.
Thank you, Howie. God bless.
God bless. And that's a wrap. You can find the show notes with links to everything we talked about today at plantyourself.com/624. Okay, movement news. Had a good workout today. I have been strengthening myself. I took a lot of time off, relaxed, and I'm kind of back. And today felt good. I was actually huffing and puffing without feeling too queasy or dizzy. So I'm looking forward to getting back and preparing for various Ultimate tournaments coming up in the coming months. That's about it for me for this week. As always, be well, my friends.